And what I've really found helps is actually using data to make those quick decisions, actually looking at what type of data could tell us how performant is my system, how secure is it, how accessible is it, are we hitting performance issues? So rather than being reactive to customers ringing up and saying, wait a minute, I've used the app and it doesn't work, using that digital transformation, we can know before the customer and we can actually resolve things quicker. So I'd say digital transformation has been very central to everything that I do.
Welcome to the E-Commerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives, a podcast by Noibu, where we explore the elite strategies and cutting-edge insights with our expert guests. Get ready to propel your e-commerce business to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Toolbox Experts Perspective. Joining us today, we have Dileep Marway, all the way over from the UK. So very excited to have Dileep on today. Welcome, Dileep.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
Awesome. Well, Dileep, why don't we start off by learning a bit more about your career journey and how you ended up in your role. Obviously, you're in an executive role for And Digital, so maybe talk us through your career journey so far. And yeah, curious how you got here.
Of course. So I studied pharmacy at Aston University initially. Didn't really enjoy it, found that it wasn't for me. And then I switched to computer science, graduated in 2006. Now, what I'd say is that scientific mindset has sort of carried me through my career, that attention to detail, the ability to sort of have a scientific approach to things. So I've kind of taken that, although I didn't finish pharmacy, I think it really shaped my career and it shaped how I move forward. So started off my career, interestingly enough, in systems testing. So very much attention to detail, and I felt that my scientific aspects really aligned nicely. Then I worked for NFU Mutual, who's an insurer, and essentially there I was a MI data intelligence officer. Pretty snazzy title. In today's day and world, it's probably more of a data scientist, but it sounded great at the time. And then I found that I really had a passion for aligning people with tech. And that's when I started to scale out and grow teams. So I worked at Signet, namely Ernest Jones and H. Samuel. And that's when I got my first sort of inkling into it's all about people for me. People is the heart of technology. And if you can keep people happy, you can essentially go on that journey piece to essentially get great technology as an outcome. So I worked there, and then I helped to set up the Economist, the publisher, and scale the team in central Birmingham. And we set up an engineering center of excellence from scratch. I'm really proud of that because it was all about people. It was all about us being together and actually digitally transforming from not just being a paper that goes through the letterbox on a Friday, but essentially pushing us to be web first, pushing us to have a mobile app. And I remember when we pushed that mobile app, we pushed the conversion by 15%, and it was massive, right? And we just whetted the appetite of the execs. And that really pushed our digital transformation. So that piece at The Economist, I'm very passionate about, care about it a lot. And then I thought, I've done startup, I've scaled up to 100 plus people. I now want to work in an enterprise. So I looked after a team of 100 plus in India for SHL, who essentially work in data science. And that was great because I essentially got to utilize my skills around digital transformation, DevSecOps, engineering, QA, aligning people with the tech. And then after that, I thought I'll set up my own business, called it Be More Meerkat Limited, just in terms of being more curious, because that's me. And I worked as a fractional CTO for a testing partner out in Saudi Arabia, and absolutely loved that. And then the opportunity came along to work with the Football Association. And I'm a massive football fan, so I couldn't turn that one down. And I worked as an interim head of app dev for 6 months and really enjoyed it. Really helped them with their digital transformation. Really helped them to sort of utilize and see the value of technology, but essentially making sure that it wasn't a hindrance to the game, but also it didn't hinder the ability for people to enjoy the game. So mobile apps, websites, grassroots football. And then most recently, I'm working for And Digital, and who's a digital services provider. We aim to close the digital skills gap, and I'm supporting CIOs, CTOs, and execs with their problem statements. So I'm very passionate about helping people. And that people-centric approach really aligns because for me personally, if you can get the best out of people and you can keep people happy, their aptitude to grow will increase. And ultimately, that will help the C-suite. It means better revenue. It means better conversion of your products. It means that you'd lose less customers. So ultimately, for me, if I was to say what I'm most passionate about, I wouldn't say technology per se. I'd actually say people, because it's always about the people.
Love it. Great intro. And maybe this is a good segue into how do you define cultural transformation? Why is it critical? Obviously, there's a lot of topics around transformation. So I'm curious, like, what does cultural transformation mean in your own words, and why is it critical?
So for me, I think with how the market is, Kailin, it's important that companies can adapt and they can course correct. So with technology moving so quickly, for me, cultural transformation means that companies can quickly adapt to changes and they can understand the market demands such that they can move forwards. So if you look at the technology sort of market 10 years ago, if you compare it to now, it's very different, right? So for me, that cultural transformation is about making sure that your team is aligned, you're high performing. It's not so much about those hero developers that you may have heard of 10, 15 years ago, but it's actually about the team having the sort of we mentality rather than the I mentality. I like to normally relate these things to football because I'm passionate. But if you think about a football team and winning, for instance, you need those strikers who can actually put the ball in the net. You need to make sure that everybody is aligned to that behavior. Everyone's aligned to training. Everyone's aligned to what they eat. Everyone's happy to challenge openly. So for me, with the right cultural transformation and with the right values and behaviors, it gives you a better chance to actually adapt in the market. And if you can adapt in the market, you can get ahead of your competitors. It may be that you're going in one direction and you see a gap in the market and you think, wait a minute, I don't want to do this. I'm now going to do this. So for me, cultural transformation should always be at the heart of what you do, because I don't think it stays the same. The only state it can stay the same is where you think it's that state and you think it's stationary, but it can go up and it can go down. Culture can be great at one time. The culture can drop at another time. And as a leader, you should be able to understand that and support your team. Are your team burned out? Are your team engaged? Are your team worried about things that are outside their control? For instance, when COVID happened, teams did need that additional support. Teams did need time to actually look after their family. So I think that cultural transformation piece as a leader should always be at the heart of what you do.
That's cool. I never really heard that term prior to today. So that's really, I love the way you framed it, and it makes a ton of sense. And moving on to another type of transformation, which is more digital. Obviously, you've seen it across different industries. You've worked in different industries. Yeah, how have you seen this evolve over time, and how is it becoming more critical than ever before?
So I think initially, I would probably say a very long time ago, the view may have been that there was some skepticism towards technology in terms of the value. But over time, I feel now companies are using technology as an enabler, and they're using it actually to get ahead of their competition. So they've seen the efficiency gain. For instance, when I mentioned the Economist before, how massive was that transformation from just having a paper at the newsagents where people buy it to actually being, we can deliver news whenever you need it to the platform that you use, like your phone. And personally myself, another example, I remember I used to buy the paper. Now I'm actually reading the paper on my iPad. So it's more sustainable. Works really well for me because I can bookmark the aspects that I really like, the articles, and come back to it. Imagine if I did that on a piece of paper. I'd be ripping up things. I'd be putting them in the corner. I'd be thinking, I want to read this back. So that transformation piece has been absolutely massive. And what I've really found helps is actually using data to make those quick decisions. Actually looking at what type of data could tell us how performant is my system, how secure is it, how accessible is it, are we hitting performance issues? So rather than being reactive to customers ringing up and saying, wait a minute, I've used the app and it doesn't work, using that digital transformation, we can know before the customer and we can actually resolve things quicker. So I'd say digital transformation has been very central to everything that I do. If I look at my role at the moment, I'm essentially going in, a CIO, CTO exec will say, I've got this problem. And I'm thinking of my digital transformation experiences to say, have you thought of this? Have you thought of using the cloud? Have you thought of putting tests in the pipeline such that when you run this test, you can't actually commit to master without those tests actually working. So digital transformation for me is absolutely massive. And I'd say it allows you to get the value out of something. And one good example that I always think of is if a child had a toy. If we looked at digital transformation from that perspective, you would add lots of bells and whistles on that toy. You'd add really cool sounds. You'd have a remote control so the child could reverse it back and forwards. You'd have it so that if it was about to hit the wall, it essentially can stop. It can reverse. It can stop itself getting damaged. So I think for me, digital transformation has become the heart of what a lot of companies do. And what we're now seeing is the push of artificial intelligence and how you've got companies who can now transform and push themselves forward.
Now, mixing these two concepts together, how have you approached cultural transformation in businesses that are kind of going through a technology-driven change, or they're really trying to be more tech first?
So I think some mistakes that I'd made in the past was maybe I focused more on one area than another area, rather than actually understanding the problem in itself. So from my learning, I think the key thing for me first is whenever you go into a situation, it's actually making sure that you reflect and you take a step back and you essentially say, but what is the bigger problem right now? And where do I need to focus my attention? So actually talking to the people on the ground, doing surveys, doing interviews, understanding where people are in their journey, and then focusing your attention there. For me personally, if the culture is poor performing, or if people feel that the culture has a massive problem, no matter where you are in your technology transformation, there's a big chance that most likely it's going to fail. Because what you'll see is essentially, if people are unhappy, they're not creating the best product. They're not challenging each other in the right way. And at the same time, do they really care about the output? So I remember one aspect when we were setting up a team from scratch, the culture was very, very key, because we may have had the technology skills, but if people weren't happy and if people didn't actually care about the behavior and the values, would they really care about the customer? Most likely not. So I remember one exercise that we actually got an A3 sheet of paper and we said to our team, can you write down your values and your behaviors? And the team owned that and we all signed it. Anyone else who essentially came into the team, they did exactly the same. They signed it. And if somebody wasn't adhering to the behavior, if they were putting someone down and it wasn't constructive criticism, they were being rude, the team would say, look, person A, we're not going to meet our technology transformation because we're not respecting each other. We're not a high-performing team. We're not helping each other out. So for me personally, that cultural transformation has to be in sync. A bit like a seesaw, one can't be higher than the other. They can go out of sync, but then it's the leader's job to make sure that they both sort of balance and we've got a balanced result in the end. Some things that did help me on the journey was frequent feedback, making sure that people challenge each other in a constructive way, not a destructive way, and allowing people to bring their opinions, so diversity of thought, diversity of your journey piece, making sure that everyone's differences are listened to. And those were the main things for me. So very passionate about both. It's important to understand where your company is from both perspectives, not just one.
When working with, and maybe this changes depending on the size of the company, or the culture, how have you balanced rapid innovation and the need to maintain a stable and secure kind of environment? And I think the stakes get bigger when you're a bigger company, but I'm curious, to learn about how you've been able to kind of balance that.
I think for me personally, you definitely have to see where you are in the journey, like I said in the last question. But at the same time, it's making sure that you have data that guides where you are. And so if I look at myself and the journey that I've been through, if I was to set my own engineering journey, but I didn't understand what the strategic alignment was from the top, and I didn't understand what the customer wanted, it's very easy to actually get out of sync. So, for instance, when the emergence of DevSecOps came up, it was massive around security, right? It was making sure that from a mobile app perspective, from a website perspective, things were secure. People cared about security, not just when a customer asked the question, is this app secure? We understood security from an architectural perspective at the start. We could make sure that we ran a penetration test and we knew that everything was secure. But ultimately, what did that align to? That aligned to the C-suite objective, which was all of our products should be secure. So for me personally, it's making sure that your team strategy aligns to your organizational strategy. And that's an important journey that people need to go through. So normally where it's not clear at the top, it normally starts to come into the teams and they're not clear. But there needs to be bi-directional communication between the two.
Cool. No, it makes a lot of sense. And how have you leveraged team topologies to drive these types of digital transformations when you're working with these organizations?
So team topologies for me was pretty massive, Kailin. I think in a lot of roles I'd gone in as a strategic leader, it's allowed me to, it's a bit like a enterprise architect who works on a piece of work. They're looking at the strategy and they're looking at how the architecture fits together and they're thinking, where am I now and where do I need to get to? Teams topologies is very similar because what you're doing as a senior strategic leader is you're saying, where are we right now? Where do we want to be? And what are some of the challenges at the moment? And what I noticed in most organizations is you've got problems like software's too big for certain teams being pulled in multiple directions, teams not communicating too well. And we've got areas of the system that if one area of the system breaks, everything goes down. So nothing is controlled. So I remember when I first read Teams topologies, I read it and I thought, this is a game changer. It's explained in simple English. It's actually enterprise architecture at the heart. Exactly what I've been taught technically, but it's explained in such a way that experts and non-experts can understand it. So I remember I could talk about Teams topologies at a C-suite. I could talk about Teams topologies at an engineering level. I could talk at a product level. I could talk at a delivery level, and really powerful tool, right? So from an overall perspective, I found that it really helped. It really pushed communication. It really made sure that we didn't have any silos, and it made sure that it drove innovation for me. So what did I find after Teams topologies? We had improved deployment. We had a faster time to market. It pushed collaboration. It actually pushed a better culture because we were getting more released and people were more positive. So for me personally, the way that teams are set up, it's integral to the success because if you can imagine, Kailin, if you had a team of size 40 people, it's very hard to have a stand-up with 40 people, right? Whereas if you had a smaller team and you've got a distinct output and you said, this team is only working on the mobile app, don't worry about any of the integrations. All you're going to do is you're going to make the boilerplate web app and mobile app. Any integrations will be done by another team. Having that distinction of two teams working together on the same goal really can make a massive difference. So I found that at my time at The Economist, it was a massive win. And I took this same model in all of my other roles, and it's really helped in taking the C-suite on a journey.
Love that. That brings me to my next question around team first leadership and how you've been able to sounds like you've built obviously a lot of these different principles, and I'm curious how that builds into team first leadership and your different leadership styles. So that's where I'm curious to dive a bit deeper in.
Sure. So for me personally, like I said before, it's always about the people. It's always about putting people at the heart of what you do. And normally I found in situations, projects generally fail because there's a level of bias and we don't understand people. So I remember one piece of work, Kailin, I was looking after a team in Belarus. And the first thing I did was I went to Belarus and I sat down with the people. I understood them. I understood their families. And that was really important for me, just in terms of fostering that authenticity, making sure that we could communicate with each other. I understood them and they understood me. They knew that I made that massive move to go and see them in person, and nobody had gone to see them for about 7 years. And that was all because I wanted to understand them, understand their well-being, help with their development. So I think for me, when we talk about team first leadership, it's a leader making sure that no matter what happens, they care about their team. If one of their team has a problem, we'll all help that person, right? We win as a team and we lose together as a team. So for me, I always mention the fact that it's always about the people. It sounds a simple thing to say, but ultimately that's what technology should be, right?
I love that. And as we look to wrap up, I think something, given how the economy's been over the last couple of years, I'm curious, when you get brought into a lot of these different projects and consulting, what are some of the most significant challenges that you're seeing that businesses are facing as a whole, and any of them relative to culture that's being brought up? I think would be super, super interesting to hear.
I think what's interesting, Kailin, is imagine going into an organization and you're completely new. And generally, a lot of people have heard these concepts, teams topologies. They've heard of cultural transformation. They've heard people say it's all about people, put the team first. But because of those failed instances that they may have had in the past, the mentality would say be resistant to change. And internally, they'd be saying, sounds great, but we've heard it before. How many people have come before and it keeps failing? It never works. So I think the importance of a leader, and this is key to any sort of change. It could be AI, which is massively prevalent right now, but it's making sure that when you actually talk about change, it's seeing that change isn't just you putting the change in place and not telling anyone and going to people at the end and saying it's done. It's actually making sure that the vision's clear. You're involving people as early as possible. People need training, get them trained. When things go right, celebrate those things going right. But when things go wrong, be open and honest to say we're human. Everyone makes mistakes. We're going to course correct, and this is why we're course correcting. One thing that I've used in the past, and it's worked really well, is a concept called ADKAR. And that's really added value in that it allows us to see when we have change, are we making sure that we've gone through the right journey? So is there awareness for the change? If there's not awareness, how can we do a presentation? Do we need to share it in a better way? Do we need to get the team together? Is there actually a desire for change? If there's not a desire for change, what can you do to get that buy-in? Is there actually knowledge? Do people need training? Do you need to bring experts in? Do we need support? Do we need ability to do it? Again, very similar to knowledge. And the two are quite similar in that knowledge more so provides the information and training. Ability is once we've given the training, can they do it? Do they need to practice? Do they need a training curve? Do they need to do it for a bit longer? And then the last one is reinforcement. So this is making sure that the change is actually sustained over time. And once we mention the change, people don't just forget about it and then we don't come back to it. So ADKAR for me, I remember sitting in a C-suite and a good friend of mine mentioned it. And I thought, this is massive. And I've just taken that with me. Because for me personally, any sort of industry, anything that's massive in the industry, you have to go through that transformation piece and you have to keep people updated. Because for me, I always use this analogy of having ducks in a row. Once you lose one of those ducks, essentially the output normally fails. So for me, it's making sure that all those ducks are aligned and you're all in sync and you're moving in the right direction together.
This was super insightful. And as we're wrapping up, I just want to thank you, Dileep, for your time, for your attention, for your wisdom, for your knowledge. And thank you so much. It's been a phenomenal episode.
Thank you, Kailin. Really appreciate it.
The E-Commerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the E-Commerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.